Welcome to the PFF Betting Show Sunday Night Edition. We are going to do a quick recap of what we saw in Week 1, maybe some look aheads into Week 2, general reactions. But first, let's introduce. We have some new guests that are going to be joining us on Sunday. We've got Daniel Galper and John Taormina. Guys, I mean, Daniel, we'll start with you because I also want to hear about the Lions game that you're coming from, as obviously that was an overtime thriller. But tell us who you are and what you're kind of most looking forward to, in addition to give us something good from that Sunday night game.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a senior at Michigan, so I was able to make the 30-minute drive out to Ford Field for that game. Amazing. I went to a couple games last year, but none of them as good as this one. I mean, Goff, Stafford, overtime thriller, really nothing like it. So yeah, very, very interesting game. Very surprised, honestly, about how it played out. We'll get to that in a little, but yeah, Lions able to really lock down and get a game that it looked like they were going to let slip away from them. So
yeah, no, that's for sure. John, you've obviously got a history in the league, which I think makes for some very appealing perspective. I also can't help but see LaShawn McCoy jersey in your background, so some deep Philly roots there. You'll have to see it, John. We're super excited to have you. Tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, a little bit of background.
Yeah, so I spent 7 years in Atlanta running their analytics department from 2015 to 2022. So had some crossover with several coaches that are around the league right now. And honestly, going into tonight's game, I was expecting a little bit of a letdown from the Rams, and their defense played, I think, better than I was expecting. And I know Raheem Morris, who they lost at defensive coordinator. And so a loss like that, I thought would kind of play out a little bit more tonight. But it was interesting to see. And yeah, a couple other takes on some other guys that I worked with, but yeah, in these early weeks, it's always like kind of a crapshoot in terms of preparation. So I'm not super surprised that some of the games that we saw didn't necessarily play out to our priors, but that's the name of the game in Week 1.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we've got John. John is obviously got a background doing analytics. I think he can kind of provide a unique perspective of how to digest a game in a way that a coach might, or how you'd prepare, a GM or some person on staff for kind of how to process what happens and what to look for next. And then, Daniel, we're just continuing the PFF to Michigan pipeline here. Another great analytics mind. You can find a lot of his writing on PFF.com. We're super stoked to have both of you guys. This is going to be a fun season looking ahead, and I can't wait to kind of make some money on Sunday night. So we talked about the Sunday night game. The Rams at this point were running really, really thin on the offensive line. Puka Nacua goes down. This game is 17-3. It looks like it's all but over, and yet they somehow find a way to come back. I think the question here is almost like, is Sean McVay so good, or at least the coaching environment that he's created allow basically anyone to kind of flourish, and you have these like basic pieces and the rest can kind of fall into place? I can't think of many other situations at this point where you have basically everyone but like your quarterback and like Cooper Kupp. He's not the same player. It took him like 14 catches. They had no ability to actually have any time to let any plays develop. Stafford's time to throw was like 2.2 seconds or something like that. So I'm curious what you guys think on that. That's kind of my main takeaway from here. And just like their Rams are going to have a high floor so long as Stafford and McVay are there.
I was looking into, like I said, I was kind of surprised that their defense played so well with losing Raheem. I was looking into their new defensive coordinator, Chris Shula, and he's actually been there since 2017. So think that's kind of a sharp under the radar promotion by McVay, that someone who understands their strengths, what they can do well, what Raheem did well, and has kind of been studying ready for this promotion. And so, I mean, that's my takeaway anyway, that was a very savvy promotion that he made to kind of keep things together and really even like take a step forward in some ways.
Yeah. So Daniel, I know you had mentioned off air that you had liked the Rams Cardinals over 48.5 earlier. First off, that this line is now sitting at 49.5, and we will discuss that in a bit. I'm curious, one, if you're still on that line, and two, well, I guess this is really part of the same question here of like, does the defensive performance in some way tonight actually kind of change your view from a couple hours before game time?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I think everything really set up for this to just be a smash spot for the Lions offense. Just come in at home, do what they've done the last year or so. And it really just wasn't that, like, especially in the air. I mean, running the ball, they had a lot of success. And then obviously in overtime, they got back to that. And obviously were able to just end the game. But they really struggled through the air. Their success rate was in the 30s, which is not something you see at home from a Lions passing attack. And, you know, you have obviously a Rams defense who, has some continuity with the new DC, but is adjusting to life after Aaron Donald and Raheem Morris, and just really expecting them to just get kind of walked all over. And this defense might be a little better than I was expecting. I think obviously it is one game. You don't want to adjust too far off priors and stuff like that after just week one. But I think I'm not looking to go and just bet that over the way I was, especially after seeing the Cardinals, which we'll probably talk about a little later, where that kind of set up for a game that I thought was going to be in the 50s for sure. And we even saw it get to, there were some 50s on the board before kickoff, and I don't think you'll see that. But I think with that over, I definitely want to see the status of the Rams offensive line and with Puka, of course. But I still think the Rams are going to be an over team in general. I think especially when they fall behind like they did today, that's when McVay reaches into the bag and just brings out the good passing plays. And even without Puka, like, he has enough with Stafford and Kupp to just find success. So
yeah,
I'm definitely
Tyler Johnson was ripping off chunk plays out here. He's kind of got anyone. I think you bring up a particularly interesting point. That like this is still week one and priors, do matter. And like everyone kind of wants to overreact. We're seeing our first bit of new data for the first time. I mean, I've looked at the same data sets for months at a time now. It's a very exciting time, and you can kind of start to get new data trickling in. But I think it's very important to kind of key in on the fact that like it's just 1 week and like how much has really changed. And with that said, you also do start to get new data, and there are only 17 games in a season. And especially if you want to be a little bit ahead of the curve, where you have to kind of like take into account this new data and say like, hey, is this a relevant sample? Is this really going to teach me something? So I guess with that in mind, right, with the caveat of like, it's still only been 1 week. What are some of the like main takeaways, high level or team in particular, that you're looking at after week one?
I mean, I'll just add one more point to tonight's game that in hindsight, it was essentially a rematch from the playoffs, and a lot changed on the Rams side of things, which I think actually like in preparation favored them because they could the lines did not change. So they could study what they did against them, kind of self-scout themselves as well to see like where were we vulnerable. It was a close game. And whereas the Lions, it was kind of like a wild card. What are we going to see from the Rams? Is it going to be different? Is it going to be the same? So I will say the Rams' defensive performance might be, like you're saying, it's 1 week, and it may have been just a perfect storm where they were able to self-scout themselves all offseason, find a few things to take. I mean, they contained Amon-Ra very well tonight. They didn't do that last year. So just little things like that they were able to use all offseason to get an edge in week one. I don't know how much that defensive performance, like you're saying, like we're talking about next week's over. I would still expect them to put up points next week, and potentially, especially facing Arizona, who looked good this week as well, that I could see that spot still being a favorable over spot.
Yeah. Daniel, what about you for kind of these high level week one takeaways?
Yeah, I think a team that I was interested in an offseason and wasn't necessarily running to back in this game or in any markets. I was just really curious how the Saints were going to look. And they looked really good. How much of that was the Panthers just really being bad? I mean, it's interesting. A lot of really smart people were high on the Panthers this year, and obviously it's one game, but there was some upside there with the new head coach and stuff like that. And I mean, the Saints, it was just pure domination. And I'm really curious to see like how much signal that is that the Saints might be good this year. And I think something I'm really looking to is this market against the Cowboys next week. The look ahead was about 6 or so. It's gotten out to 6.5, 7 in some places. And I think, I don't know, I try to, stop myself from overreacting to week 1, like I was saying, but I think the Saints have a really high ceiling this year. I think that with Clint Kubiak coming over from San Francisco, I think he's just going to do a lot of good things on offense. And there was a lot of question marks with the offensive line and with Derek Carr, of course. And the Saints O-line graded out really, really well today, especially in pass protection. Again, that was against the Panthers' defensive line. The Cowboys' defensive line is very different. So, I'm obviously approaching that with a little caution, but that's a team that I'm really interested going forward because I just think if everything clicks, the offensive line, performs maybe not as well as they did last week, but is very good, and Carr clicks with the Kubiak system, I think this could be a playoff team and a team that could maybe make some noise if things break for them.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And despite the fact that I'm wearing a Saints sweatshirt, that is just a function of Rashid Shaheed, who's on the back here. Shout out to him, of course, for scoring a long touchdown. My phone immediately buzzed with about 11 texts of Shaheed, all caps, exclamation points. But yeah, I mean, I think that I certainly was on the alt of Carolina, and I think to your point, Daniel, a lot of the hesitation I had was this was an offensive line that projected to be atrocious. And Carr is the exact type of quarterback that almost needs an offensive line to succeed, right? There are certain types of quarterbacks, think like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, that can do so well to create after the play is broken down that the quality of your offensive line matters less for a quarterback like Derek Carr, who kind of needs that structure. And I think to your point that it's possible that this was just a function of it's 1 week. The Panthers pass rush is really bad. Or there's a small chance, and it's at least good to go in, I think, with this mindset of okay, let me start to build this prior. And if it's sustains itself in weeks 3, weeks 4, maybe you can kind of be a little bit earlier to the market of okay, this offensive line is actually pretty good. And if this offensive line is pretty good, and if you do have a coordinator who can scheme around that, maybe they graded out well because they did a Packers thing where they effectively schemed their way out of quick pressures, or just the offensive line's good. They have weapons. Olave and Shaheed are very good receivers, I think. And this could be an offense that makes some noise, especially in the NFC South, which I think is a particularly interesting division to talk about. Okay, everyone wants to rail on the Panthers. Fine. I'm going to argue and say this was all in the cards. We knew what the left tail possibility was for the Panthers. Nothing's new. It would not be crazy if Bryce Young still puts together good performances, if he's still better than what was currently priced in from the offseason. It's 1 game. This was all baked in. But I think the Bucs are a particularly interesting team, and even the Falcons today, which I think the expectations maybe shift a little bit. Again, it's 1 game. We're going to keep on caveating with that. But John, right, you obviously work for the Falcons. What's going through Raheem Morris's mind right now? How's he kind of looking at the Falcons' week 1 game? What's he saying to his team? Is he saying it's just 1 game, or is he kind of worrying a little bit about some of the fundamental problems that the Falcons might have?
I don't think he would worry too much. I mean, I watched some of that game, and I think really the difference in the game was the Cousins interceptions. And I mean, that's a product of 1 week. That's really out of character for him. It's also working with a new coordinator, new receivers that he's not used to. I mean, when you have a fully new situation like that, it takes a few weeks to kind of hit your rhythm. So, I mean, I was kind of expecting them to struggle a little bit out of the gate. And I also was on the Saints. I mean, I agree with Daniel. I think of all the teams in that division, I expected the Saints to win the division. I haven't really changed that much. If anything, I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw from the Bucs today, that I would almost bump them ahead of the Falcons in terms of teams that I expect to be competitive in that division. And I'm not to say that the Falcons can't be. I just think that, like I said, it's going to take a few weeks. They have, I think, the Eagles and Chiefs the next 2 weeks, which is just brutal. So, I mean, that's not a great start to the season when you're having to kind of adjust on the fly like this.
No, certainly not. And I think Tampa Bay is a particularly interesting spot. I mean, right now they're 6.5 on the look ahead. They are underdogs to Detroit. That's actually moving a little bit towards 7. Daniel, I'm curious how you're kind of making this Tampa Bay game. I mean, look, Washington's defense is probably particularly bad. I thought this was a spot to kind of bet the Tampa Bay Alts. I wrote this up this week. It's also hard to ignore when a team puts up 40 points in the NFL, especially coming off the second half of the season. Like, are you buying at least like some signal here in Baker Mayfield and the Bucs? I'll ask that from the long-term view, and then also, do you have any interest kind of looking ahead to next week and this game against the Lions?
Yeah, I think an output like that is always notable, but I think this was just kind of how it was going to be. I really like this over this week. I just think the Commanders secondary is just brutal. I think, especially when you have talent in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I think it would have been really hard for the Bucs to not throw all over them today. So I'm not reacting to this too much, honestly. The score got out of hand, of course, and the Bucs did play well. Baker played great. I think I'm not super high on the Bucs coming into the year, or at least I wasn't. And I think a lot of that was because there was questions about how sustainable Baker's like late down production was. But I think to some extent it is sustainable because he's just really good at evading pressure and extending plays on key third downs and stuff like that. So I think they're live to win the NFC South. I don't think they're an amazing team, but I think that offense, especially when they have a mismatch on the outside like they did today, they're able to exploit that. I think that's become very clear. And I think when they get in game situations where they have 2 amazing receivers and the secondary just can't keep up with that, I think they're just going to have success. I think when they face teams that have quality at cornerback, I think they're going to really struggle. And I'm not super high on that defense. They were all right today. I think Jaden Daniels had some moments on the ground, but wasn't great through the air. So I think the Bucs I'm pretty confident on my Bucs opinion that like there are situations where they're going to find success, especially on offense. But I think when they can't lean on that talent discrepancy on the outside, I think they're going to struggle.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, this is still pending review, but what was most notable to me was Chris Godwin. I mean, even just watching him, he looked like he had an extra step. He's got a 89 PFF grade pending review, one of the top marks on the slate. And I think that's like a really added element. I mean, Mike Evans, like so much ink has been spilled kind of talking about how good Evans has been for the Bucs over the last bunch of years. And I do think this is a particularly intriguing passing attack. Granted, there still might be some problems. I think you mentioned some interesting points also on the Washington side of like this is kind of to be expected, at least on the defensive front. And I'm looking ahead to the Giants and Commanders game. And I think we can maybe take a second to talk about the disaster of a performance from the Giants. Again, I will make the same case that I did with Carolina. This is not new. I mean, Daniel Jones has really struggled with the blitz. This is like Brian Flores' MO. I think it's actually like decently likely that we're going to look back at this Vikings defense as a top unit. I think they kind of sneakily have a bunch of talent, and I'm certainly a huge fan of Brian Flores and all that he can do. But I think this is an interesting spot to kind of talk about, like, where do the Giants and Commanders stand? Are they in the same tier of team? Are they just 2 like really bad teams you want nothing to do with? Daniel, you mentioned a point about pace. I think this is a pretty intriguing total. John, I'm curious what you make of the Giants game this past week, how you're looking ahead to their week 2 matchup against the Commanders.
I mean, I had them going into the season in the same tier, and I don't think that anything in week 1 really changes that for me. I'm also, as you know, the probably only member of the Danny Dimes fan club. So I have high hopes that I'm buying the bottom there. So also I'm biased that DQ in Washington, I had high hopes that he'd be able to turn their program around. So, I mean, for both of them, I have I'd say bullish optimism going forward in the rest of the season. I don't know that either of them are good teams, and nor will they be good teams. Looking at the matchup, I think I would slightly lean the Giants just based on what I saw in week 1. I don't think that I would put much stock in the poor performance that we saw from their offense. Just like you said, Vikings have a great defense. I don't think that that's going to be an issue moving forward. I like what I saw from Malik Neighbors. I think he'll continue to evolve as he goes forward. A little disappointed. I didn't check the snap shares on Jalen Hyatt. I don't know. Did he play much today? Do you know?
Not too much, no.
Okay, because that's another weapon that I think that they underutilized last year and could utilize more going forward. So overall, I think I'm still bullish on both of those teams in terms of outperforming expectations, but I don't think that I'm leaning one way or the other. If I had to lean, I would take the Giants, though.
Yeah, Hyatt ran a route only on 9 of 52 Giants dropbacks.
Hate to see it.
Hate to see it. Daniel, how are you looking at this game? Are you intrigued by this over?
Yeah, so I definitely want to be. I think that I have the Commanders circled as a team that these totals are being aligned at or below league average scoring. And I just think the Commanders profile as a team that are just going to play to the over more. I think the defense is just brutal, like I was saying. And I think there's enough there to be optimistic on the offensive side. I talked about a little bit about this week, but I think they want to play faster. Their tempo has been up, and I think that just leads to the over. The thing with this game here is I think that what made me like the total against the Bucs so much in week 1 was I was pretty confident the Bucs were going to be able to score, and that was just going to set the game script into the Commanders playing catch up, and they were going to go fast and move the ball and all of that stuff, which made it a really good spot. With the Giants offense, I'm not really sure what to think. Obviously a tough matchup in week 1, but it's a very stoppable force against a very movable object here, and I'm not really sure what's going to happen. I think I do lean to the over right now, and I want to do a little more work on that before I, replace that. But I do think that is worth a look for sure, and I think going forward, the Commanders total is probably where I'll look first or second when lines come out on Sunday nights. I think it's just a really interesting angle.
I actually think this is one of my favorite spots looking at the board here. That's the over in this game. I think you're talking about a stoppable force and a movable object. I mean, this is I think these are two of the worst defenses in the NFL, teams that are both going to play fast. And I do think that a lot of maybe this is going to come back to bite me here. I do think that a lot of the Giants' troubles were a function of the Vikings defense, or at least a matchup with Washington is exactly what the doctor ordered. I just think these defenses are so bad, and I do think the offenses will be competent enough, especially the kind of floor that Jaden Daniels' legs provide for the Washington offense. What I think was, and I want to get the exact data on this tomorrow, what I think was most surprising watching this game, and I watched it very closely, was Daniel's ability to his pocket presence effectively of knowing actually when to take off. I think he only took 2 sacks. And what really plagued him in college was his pressure to sack rate. And it seemed, at least it's one game, that was kind of on the plus side for him. I think that's a kind of intriguing spot that I'll be looking at. I think kind of moving on to some of the other games, and I think a recap of a game that I think kind of fell under the radar is just the Texans and Colts. I think we really got the full Anthony Richardson experience there of just 2 absolute highlight-worthy, unbelievable throws, balls that are going 65 yards in the air, leading his receivers for touchdowns, and then just nothing else the rest of the game. I think Houston's a wagon. I don't think there necessarily needs to be more said about that. But we're gonna have Jordan Love's out. The Colts are right now 3.5 favorites. It's really moving towards 3.5 at Green Bay. The total is 41.5. Do either of you guys have a play here? Are you buying kind of a lot of what Richardson and Steichen can do? Is it a lot more of the highlight worthy plays that are to come, or kind of what happened in between of just like nothingness on offense and an inability to stop the run?
I think it's going to be all of it. I think Anthony Richardson is the highest variance player in the NFL, and maybe that I've seen in a long time. I mean, some of these the good throws were just things that nobody really can do. I mean, that 65 yards in the air on a dime was just unbelievable. But then he's missing. I mean, A.D. Mitchell should have had 2 touchdowns in his debut. Like AR is just missing some throws that, really should get made. So I don't really know, honestly, how to deal with the Colts going forward. I think that I don't really have an opinion on the Packers game. I think there's just so much unknown with what's going to happen with Green Bay. I personally hope that they go trade for a backup. Maybe that won't impact this game, but just going forward. Even if Love isn't out for on the longer end of what it could be, I think that they have a great offense, and LaFleur with a functional quarterback, doesn't have to be an amazing quarterback, but someone who can just make solid plays. I think they can still be a really good team. So yeah, I think the Colts. I was high on the Colts coming into the year. I had the Colts in this game. And I think Steichen is going to get the most out of Richardson possible. I just think this is what it's going to look like. I think you're going to have the really amazing throws that scramble for a touchdown at the end of the game. You're just going to have these plays that a lot of players just can't make. But then, I could be wrong, obviously. He could iron everything out and could, the short to medium accuracy could work out for him. But this just looks like the Anthony Richardson experience. And that's, it's just good to know that that's what he's going to be. I don't know if that makes me want to run to bet him as a road 3.5 favorite, but I think there's going to be spots, I think, especially against better teams when they're a bigger underdog, where you're going to want to embrace the variance of Anthony Richardson and say, okay, I'll take a plus 250, plus 300 price that maybe he just has the game that he can and really limits the bad plays.
Yeah. Playing into the volatility of Richardson, I think makes a lot of sense. John, how are you kind of seeing this game?
I don't have a play. I agree with Daniel that, I was looking at the Texans-Colts game, and I felt like other than the 2 long touchdowns, the Colts defense or the Texans defense played pretty well, but that you can't say other than the 2 long touchdowns because those were amazing throws. And like he said, I think that's just the experience we're going to get. I think week to week, if you don't have those amazing connections, it can look a lot different. So I don't have a play on the game, especially Love. I just will stay away.
Yeah, I guess this is my second time now where I've got to play where neither of you don't. I think this Colts 3 is going to close a lot closer to 5. I mean, if Malik Willis is starting this game, which all signs point to him doing, I mean, the guy is magnetic to sacks. It doesn't even matter if the Colts don't have a pass rush, and that's certainly a weakness on their defense. I do not see this is a massive, massive gap, I think, in quarterback play and coach play. And I think LaFleur's great, but Willis is such a huge step back. I think I'm grabbing this at 3 while it's still here. The Colts, I think, are just in a completely different tier of team, even if Anthony Richardson's a volatile quarterback. I think just like almost the floor that Shane Steichen's going to provide. I mean, he was doing it with Gardner Minshew last year. I just see this as a complete tier difference, and that this is not on the other side of 3 yet. It is something that's particularly intriguing to me. Speaking of teams that kind of are intriguing, pesky, the Patriots surprising the Bengals, obviously, or maybe it was not so much of a surprise, though they were 43% in the circa Survivor contest. The Survivor contest is where you pick one winner, one team per week. You cannot use them later on in the season, and the last man standing survives. And nearly half the field was knocked out from this game. They were also the biggest favorite on the slate. We can talk about kind of takeaways from Cincinnati, and also kind of looking ahead to Did we learn anything new about New England? Was this just like a bad Cincinnati performance here? Right now, we've got New England at home, 3.5-point underdogs to Seattle next week. Daniel, we'll start with you. How are you looking at kind of the Bengals, Patriots game, and then looking ahead to the Patriots and Seahawks?
Yeah, so I'm a Patriots fan, and I don't know if anyone was more surprised by this win than me. I did not see this coming at all. I mean, I thought I was very high on the Bengals offense coming into the year, and I thought that they would just kind of have their way with the Pats. I think that this is something we've seen in week ones from Joe Burrow. I think in the past there's been like the excuse of recovering from injury, which I guess he still is, but he missed a bunch of time in the lead up to last year and all that. And I don't know. I think that I want to be high on Burrow. I think there's a lot of stuff there that I like. You could say yes, this was without T. Higgins. That matters a lot, and it definitely does. Offenses, when they go from having multiple weapons to one weapon, I mean, the drop off is always massive. And it makes sense that, you would perform worse without a great receiver like Higgins. But I don't know. I was not high on this Patriots defense coming into the year. I thought losing Belichick was going to matter a ton, and I think it still will. I kind of view this game, could be just like my skepticism as a fan, but just as a very fluky game. And I don't really, it doesn't change my opinion in a big way on the Patriots. It was a weird one where, you're kind of going into the year, even in week one, like already in draft pick mode, and then they're winning and you just have no idea really how to react. So I'm excited, going forward. I mean, maybe Gerard Mayo is just really, really good. And that would be awesome, but I'm not really running to back the Pats at 3.5 at home. I'm also generally high on the Seahawks and Mike McDonald. So I think this will be a stay away for me, but this is definitely a surprising result. And I think it's more noise than anything, but I'm excited to see.
Yeah. John, are you seeing things the same way?
I mean, similar. The one thing, I was on Cincy, so I'm with you that I was surprised to see New England come out the way they did. The one thing that I thought about, though, was we were talking about Raheem earlier. Bengals lost Brian Callahan, and I think that type of coordinators matter at the end of the day in this league. And losing someone like him, I'm not even sure. I think Dan Pritchard is who they replaced him with. Just that's a big loss. So at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not shocked to see them come out in week one with a new coordinator and sputter a little bit. All that to say, I still believe in the Bengals and I still don't believe in the Patriots. So kind of moving forward, I mean, in that game, I actually took Seahawks -3. So, I mean, I will continue to fade the Patriots. And honestly, in looking ahead, I want to say the Bengals are +6 against the Chiefs. Is that what you're seeing?
It's moved to 5.5. I was actually about to bring this game up. I think when I first saw it, it was 6.5. It's been bet down to 5.5. Still juice a little bit towards the Chiefs, at least on FanDuel where I'm seeing it. But yeah, I think the market's kind of playing in exactly to your point.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't taken it, but it's something that I've thought about. Just kind of, I don't want to overreact to the Bengals' struggles. I still think they're a solid team. I still believe Joe Burrow's a top 3 to 5 quarterback in the league. So yeah. I don't expect to see another performance like this next week.
Yeah. So we've got a 5.5-point spread in favor of Kansas City. The total is sitting at 47.5. Daniel, is there a play here for you?
I think I saw it get to 6, and I did like the Bengals at 6, kind of just buying low. I think the gaps between those teams is very likely not 6 or 4 or 4.5, whatever it would be with home field. But I mean, obviously we don't know a lot about these teams, but I just can't see that being the true difference between them. 5.5, I like it a little less, obviously, and I'm not really rushing to bet it. I want to see T. Higgins status, because I think he matters a lot, and I think he might matter more than the market even prices in. So I think that'll be a wait and see for me to see where we go. I think if we get back to 6, I think I'll come in there.
I'm seeing some 6s on the board still. I think you can get that at DraftKings, MGM, Caesars. I think FanDuel is the only one that's moved to 5.5. So I think we maybe have our first annual bet of of the week. Very exciting. I want to jump ahead to some of the primetime games that we've got. We've got the Bears, another interesting team to kind of digest the rookie performance. And we've talked a little bit about the Texans, who obviously put together a strong showing. And I think notable, of course, that like it wasn't even C.J. Stroud who kind of led the charge here. This was a Joe Mixon-filled affair, rushing for almost 160 yards. We've got the Bears right now are 6.5-point dogs. Total is sitting at 46.5. This game is in Houston on Sunday Night Football. John, we'll start with you. Anything notable here? Are you kind of buying, or I should say really selling Caleb Williams after his first game, or is this kind of just like the typical flow of how rookie seasons go, and like this was in the cards, and maybe we can kind of start to see the number one overall pick we were kind of promised?
I mean, in general, I might be a contrarian here, but selling Caleb this year. I had the Titans in a heartbreaking loss this week, and with some fluky touchdowns. I actually, for that same reason yesterday, I took the Texans -3.5 in this game. So I got some nice value there. I don't necessarily like either side at 6.5 where it stands right now. I mean, the ceiling's there with Caleb, right? And we saw flashes of it today, but I also think we saw a lot of just your average rookie struggles, if you will, that someone even like Caleb Williams could experience. So, I mean, if I had to lean even at 6.5, I still might take the Texans just because how much I like them this year. But I got my action at 3.5, and I'll just kind of sit on that.
Daniel, what are you thinking of this game?
Yeah, I'm in the exact same place. I was able to get it at 4.5 a little earlier today, and I would honestly still bet it here at 6.5. I think my only issue with the Texans coming into the year was how bad they were running the ball last year, and at the same time how much Bobby Slowick kind of wanted to run the ball, it seemed. And that was my only concern. I mean, obviously the passing attack's amazing, Stroud's amazing, and now they're rushing the ball really well. Of course, one game, but I mean, if they can be one of the rare teams that has a positive EPA per rush, and you have CJ Stroud and the defense looked pretty good besides a couple of big plays, I mean, I'm fully in on this team, and I think they're a contender and a team that I'm looking to back, I think, weekly. And you are seeing the market react to that. Like a 2-point move is significant, but I think the Bears just they could have been, if they don't get some fluky things go their way, one of the teams that looks the worst in week one. They didn't score. Their offense.
I mean, they had 150 yards of total offense. That's not exactly a recipe for success in the modern NFL. That's for sure.
No.
I think it's going to be particularly interesting because if you have another one of these performances against the Texans, and granted they're probably a tough defense, I think there might be a little bit of panic in Chicago. It's not as if the Titans are some ferocious unit, or at least they do not project as one. I think that would be kind of one of the bigger surprises of the season. I think I'm staying off this game. If anything, I like an under here, kind of playing into Daniel a lot of what you just mentioned of like, this is a Texans team which like first and foremost does want to run. I was a little bit encouraged by the second half of last season where they unleashed Stroud, but they might not have to in this spot if they can kind of ride their defense and if Caleb Williams is particularly bad. I don't think this is enough to kind of trigger a bet, but I definitely would lean under 46.5 here. Moving ahead to the Monday Night Football game. John, this is like your matchup here, right? Obviously, having worked for the Falcons for 7 years, we still see that LaShawn McCoy jersey in the background, a lot of Philadelphia paraphernalia back there. The market has significantly moved here. The Eagles are now 5.5-point favorites. This is moving towards 6. The game total at 48.5. How are you kind of viewing this game?
I mean, I already took the Eagles 5.5. I like them. I don't necessarily expect the game to be particularly close. I do think there's a huge gap between Philly at home with the talent that they have against the unit I saw in Atlanta today. Overall, I also think that I kind of like the under, just in general, I don't think I saw anything from Atlanta's offense that wowed me today. And I think that their defense actually played decently well. And especially, I don't think like the performance we saw from Philly against Green Bay, I don't know that like that offense is going to translate every single game. And in particular, this is maybe just like a thesis I have just from going to, I live it in Philly. So I've Eagles season ticket holder, been to several of their games. And I just feel like when they get a lead at home, they try to just kind of control the clock and shorten the game. And if Atlanta can't put up more than, let's say, 17 points, I could see them just kind of bleeding out the clock, if you will, and keeping the game under 48.5.
Yeah. You come to the PFF betting show, you get takes from the season ticket Philadelphia holder himself on why the Eagles are a good bet to kind of front run teams from ahead. Daniel, how are you looking at this game?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have really strong opinion here. I think I still am bullish on the Falcons offense. I think Zach Robinson is going to be really good. I think they have weapons. And I don't know, I think they might be able to move the ball on an Eagles team that they did play good offense, of course, in the Packers, but I think there's weak links out there in their secondary that are going to get exploited. And I would be a little concerned about how their defense holds up. I think would love to see, as someone who was pretty high on the Falcons coming into the year, I would love to see the offense look a lot better. I think their offensive line was really bad in this game against the Steelers. The Falcons was, and I think that is some variance and some TJ Watt. And I think that they will be a good unit going forward. So I'm not really rushing to bet anything here. I'm just very curious to see what the Falcons will look like. Because I do still think they will be an above average offensive unit. And yeah, would love to see it though, because it was a very concerning first game.
Yeah, no, it's I think the Falcons are a particularly interesting team here. It's going to look through kind of some of the games we have not yet talked about, do maybe some quick hitters if we have some bets here. John, what are you thinking of the Thursday night football game? Dolphins and Bills. Dolphins 1.5 favorites.
So, I mean, I heard a little bit of rumbling about Josh Allen's hand not necessarily being fully good to go coming out of this. Have you guys heard that?
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so I mean, just that on a short week on the road, I didn't necessarily have a play. I kind of leaned Dolphins now a little bit, and especially I think the performance we saw from the Dolphins was like typical Mike McDaniel, where first half he didn't really have it going and then kind of figured it out. And I think the Jags played solid defensively. I don't expect Miami to only score 20 points next week. So, yeah, I mean, I think Miami at home, I would lean them if I would have a play in this game.
Quite the sequence for the Jaguars, up 17-3. Having the ball in the red zone, Travis Etienne fumbles the next offensive snap as an 80-yard touchdown for Tyreek Hill. That is like emblematic of the Jaguars' experience of the last 3 years. If I don't know, if it's not that, I don't know what it is. Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting point with the Dolphins. I still think Josh Allen's gonna be able to throw the ball. I mean, unless there's some like serious hand injury here. If he's out there, I think he should be good to go. And I do think that the Bills' offense answered maybe more questions. How are they going to utilize their weapons? And granted, Arizona's probably not the best of defenses, but I think this is an offense that should score points, and the Dolphins were certainly vulnerable on the defensive side of the ball. Daniel, anything from this game?
I think I also agree. I think the Bills' offense, there were obviously a ton of questions coming into the year, replacing the receivers and all that. I think if you have a couple weapons in Josh Allen, your offense is going to be really good. So yeah, I'm not sure if I really have an opinion on the spread. I feel like, any sort of question about Josh Allen just like kind of makes me want to stay away. I'm curious to see, obviously it's reactionary from what happened today, but I'm just curious where Josh Allen anytime touchdown lines are going to be. Cause I mean, he just looks, I think more than ever, obviously he always looks to scramble in the red zone, stuff like that. But it was more than ever today, and he's obviously really good at it. So that's just something from a prop side I'll be looking at. But
like that.
I think that offense is going to be really good. I think Josh Allen, I'm looking at him for MVP, and I think it's around like plus 500, which obviously not the biggest price, but I think when you just watch that team play, like more than anyone in the NFL, it's just so clear that he is powering that team. Like without him, they could be, easily a bottom unit on offense. But yeah, the
100%.
The jump with Josh is just, it's unbelievable. So yeah,
that's
nothing there, but some other markets that I'm looking at related to Josh.
Yeah.
Will you play the Bills, Judah?
Sorry?
Will you play the Bills? Do you like them enough?
I'm thinking about it. I do want to see the status of the injury, whether it's like a little nick or like an actually serious, like, oh, he should probably be out for a couple of weeks. I think if it's a little nick, I'm definitely going to be in. I'm kind of selling the Dolphins, especially defensively. And I think the Bills kind of answered a bunch of questions for me of like, how are they going to kind of utilize their weapons? And it's like, this is a team that can win by throwing to their backs and tight ends and relying on Josh Allen's legs. Though I'm certainly intrigued by this matchup more than anything else. Kind of looking through the slate here, we've got Saints right now, 6.5-point dogs at Dallas. That line moving towards 7, total at 48.5. We briefly touched on that. We briefly touched on the Bucs also. Same situation, 6.5, a little bit towards 7 in favor of Lions. The total sitting at 48.5. We got a Browns, Jags at 3 right now, total 42.5. Anything from those games. I think these are spots that on the Tampa side, maybe I'll be throwing in some alts of just like, let's bet on Baker Mayfield being good. And this Lions defense did not do much to inspire confidence in their game tonight. Not saying that's obviously going to be determinative of how they will play in the future, but it's certainly enough for kind of a futures angle. I think I kind of want to take more of a wait and see on the Saints and Dallas as well as the Browns and Jaguars. But anything from you guys on those three?
Yeah, I really like the alt angle on the Bucs. I think that like I was saying a little earlier with the Commanders, when you have a matchup for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin that isn't, like really solid cornerbacks on the defensive side, there's just an advantage. And I think Baker knows it and is very good at exploiting it. And so I think they're very live to win that game. And yeah, there's some tail outcomes where they win that game by a lot. So yeah, definitely looking, spread probably isn't the angle I would take just because I want to play more into the variance of that game. But yeah, the alts I like a lot. And yeah, I think the Buccaneers are going to be a team that you can play into the variance of them, in the right matchup. And I think the Lions are a good matchup for that.
Yeah. John, anything from you on these three?
I had the Browns, so I had them +3 against the Jags. Just in general, obviously Watson played terrible today, but Dallas has a great defense. The Browns also have a great defense. Was not at all impressed with what I saw from Jacksonville offensively. So yeah, I mean, just given the points, and I think the Browns are a better team overall, I would take that.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting spot. Deshaun Watson really looks absolutely cooked. I mean, like how many opportunities is he going to have at this point? I think it's been a disaster. And this defense did show a little bit of holes, and defenses are fragile year over year. I think I would lean Jacksonville if I had to take a side there, but this is one that I'm going to stay off. I think San Francisco and Minnesota kind of want to take a little bit of a wait and see approach for, I guess, tonight's game, as well as the Jets and Titans. We got a Chargers Panthers at 4.5. To me, that's one that I have just like no interest in betting. I'm going to stay away. Maybe if I'm really, really sick, I'll play some Bryce Young alts because I just can't quit yet. And I think this Chargers defense is particularly bad. we got Vegas and Baltimore. Actually, I mean, Vegas was a travesty of coaching decisions, but I feel like every analytics podcast and every analytics person is just going to be talking ad nauseum about how bad the fourth down decision making is. And I guess now that I have the floor, I got to get in my one point that there's a 3rd and 1 right before J.K. Dobbins broke off that 70-yard touchdown run where his knee was a yard short and nobody reviewed it. And the refs just like had a horrific spot, didn't challenge it. I thought that was maybe more the egregious error that Antonio Pierce made, though obviously those 4th down decisions were bad. But kind of lost in that noise was that like Vegas moved the ball pretty well. And I think, granted, it was the Chiefs, so it could just be that like they're back to being an alien offense, but the Ravens defense did not inspire the same sort of confidence that they did in 2023. Also, I think going to be an appealing tails angle for me if Vegas can kind of clean it up and not have to put their coach in a decision where he punts the game away. Anything from you guys on the Vegas-Baltimore or Chargers and Panthers?
Yeah, I'm there with you on Vegas. I think both the Ravens, the way the Ravens, I project them going into the year, I think there's a lot that's missing from this team. And obviously, like, I think the biggest thing is losing Mike McDonald. The defense is just going to be worse. There's really no way to get around that, especially at the start of the year when they're still figuring everything out. And I think they're going to be vulnerable. And I think, the Raiders, obviously the result doesn't look good, but underlying stats, like Gardner Minshew is a functional quarterback, I think, and he has solid weapons. I think this is also like the kind of the exact spot where you want to take a guy like Minshew, where when they get in a game state where they're throwing the ball, he's capable of making plays and keeping a team, close enough to where, a +8.5 becomes very, very coverable. And I think if I just think of the teams that I'm just, looking to fade the most, I think the Ravens are at the top of the list. There's just a lot of questions on this team. And I think that fading them as a big favorite is just exactly the spot that I'm looking for. I'm sure when Antonio Pierce punts on a key 4th down, I'll regret it. But I think that, that line is one I've circled for sure. And, might even be looking to bet that tonight.
I've already decided at this point that I think for next week, the first 10 minutes of this podcast are just going to be dedicated to the tilting moments of the week. That is how we're going to start the segments, I think. And that was certainly me having poured onto my position with Vegas by continuing to bet them live. That was quite unfortunate. But I do agree with you that the 8.5 is particularly intriguing for many of the same reasons. John, anything from you on this game? Anything from you on Carolina and the Chargers?
No, not on either. I agree with you both that I want to like the Raiders enough to take them here, but I also am probably a little higher than what you mentioned, Daniel, on the Ravens. Obviously, they lost Mike McDonald. I think that was a big loss, but in general, I still think they're a top 5 team in the league and not one that I'm willing to bet against at this point until I see a little more from the Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, that's reasonable. I mean, this is still not a great team by any stretch of the imagination. But as week 1 reminded us, football is a weird and random game, and crazy things happen all the time. We've got one game we haven't discussed yet. That is the Steelers at the Broncos. Right now, the Broncos are 2.5-point dogs at home. The total at 37.5. The new kickoff rules already, you thought maybe we wouldn't be seeing totals in the 30s as we were accustomed to seeing last year, but we've got one firmly in the mid-30s here. I don't know who's going to be playing quarterback for the Steelers. I don't frankly know if it matters. Maybe it'll be a nice little revenge game for Russell Wilson. I'm personally staying away from this game. Anything from you guys?
I mean, probably staying away. When I looked at lines, I saw it was 3, and at that point, I would have leaned the Broncos +3. But at 2.5, I'm staying away.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are two of the teams that I just don't really have a good beat on. I think there's some teams earlier in the season you feel like you have a good read on, you're going to really bet your opinion on them. I think these are teams that, especially not knowing who's playing quarterback for the Steelers, not knowing anything about Bo Nix, I think I'm going to need a couple weeks of data on these teams to really dive into before I can confidently say I want to back or fade one of them. So I'm curious to see how that unfolds. I would love to see Russ get some revenge if he does play, but yeah, I don't really have anything there.
Yeah. No.
There's one more game we haven't talked about, Judah, and that's tomorrow's game.
That is tomorrow's game. We've only got a little bit of time, I think, to discuss. You got Jets-Niners. Right now, the Niners are favored by 3.5, moving towards 4, total at 43.5. You got any bets?
I don't. I was curious to see if you guys did, because I want to take the Niners. I really do, but I also can't. I don't know. We haven't seen Aaron Rodgers in a year, and I like a lot of the pieces the Jets have, so I'm very excited to watch the game. Probably will lay off it, though, for the most part.
Yeah, I'd probably lean the Niners, too. I think it's hard to not project San Francisco, obviously, as one of the best teams in the league. But I think the ceiling for the Jets, is very high. If Aaron Rodgers is good, like they have the pieces to really be one of the best teams in the league, in my opinion. So, that makes me want to like register that opinion in the market. But I just, there's so much unknown with Rodgers that I think, kind of like that last game, would love to just have a couple weeks of data to like really anchor my opinion to, because I don't really know where to be with Rodgers, where, I could see him being a really good quarterback again. I could see him being below average. So, when you don't know that much about the quarterback, it's pretty hard to confidently make a bet. So I agree with you there. I'm kind of just waiting and seeing, but definitely an exciting game to watch.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with the wait and see approach. The benefit that bettors have relative to the people putting out the markets is that we get to choose the bets that we want to make, whereas the market makers have to put up something for each of these games. So we should definitely use that 2-hour advantage as bettors and take in the wait and see approach. Makes plenty of sense. All right, so just to recap, I think we've got kind of 4 bets. I guess semi-consensus, or at least one that each of us has spearheaded. I'm certainly on the Colts at -3. Daniel, we got you down for the Bengals at +6. John, the Eagles at 5.5. You said you got, and it's one of your favorites. Definitely no homerism there. It can't be because you work for the Falcons. It's a whole thing. And then I think maybe some leans on Vegas at 8.5. That was our Sunday show. It's been a long, at least for me, almost 30 hours of basically straight week 1 football. And that is incredible, but I am exhausted. This was a pleasure, guys. And to our listeners, thank you. We will be iterating on this as we kind of go along. Tell us what you do and do not like. I'm definitely going to start with kind of a little on tilt segment for next week, as I just felt myself constantly wanting to bring up a lot of what went wrong for me betting on Sunday. But this was great, guys, and we will see you next week.